As time goes by on the Big Ten calendar, it's becoming abundantly clear it is going to be a survival of the fittest competition to get to Indianapolis and to get to the college football playoff. Which teams can survive the gauntlet? Which teams are the fittest, and which teams could also give them hell along the way? Let's take a trip around this big nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
What did this last week teach us? Maybe throughout all of college football, but we know we are narrowly focused on the Big Ten Conference. What did that Washington-Michigan game teach us? What did that USC and Minnesota game teach us? It taught us that the Big Ten is an extremely deep conference this year, and there are teams that are going to throw some punches at you. Nothing is guaranteed in the Big Ten Conference, which makes it that much more enjoyable to watch. There's no game that you can skip over in the Big Ten. I'm sure people like Tony Petitti and the people that are calculating television ratings, of course, certainly love that as well. Now, it is going to be a war of attrition. It is going to be a survival of the fittest to get to the end of the road. And in the Big Ten, that end of the road is Lucas Oil Stadium. Now, it's not only Lucas Oil Stadium. It's also with the expanded conference, with the expanded playoff. It is a 12-team college football playoff. And it is, even though that there are going to be some teams that, of course, won't, 16 of them, right, won't make the Big Ten championship, there are teams that are still going to have to throw some punches back, not receive a haymaker and go down like some teams did. They're going to have to stand tall to get an at-large spot in the college football playoff. I'm going to get into which team specifically right now I believe could weather the storm and get to that point as well. Now, there's really three qualities that I look at when I think a team that can survive this war that is going to be the Big Ten and take everybody's best shot throughout the course of the season. First of all, I look for a complete team, right? I look for a team that is really good on offense. I look for a team that is really good on defense. I look for a team that is good on special teams, right? You need to have a complete team because sometimes your throw game isn't working, so you got to run. Sometimes your run game isn't going to be working, so you got to throw, right? Sometimes your offense isn't going to be great, so you got to be able to lean on your defense as well. When you take some of your best shots against some of these Big Ten teams in a deep conference, like there's going to be days where some days it's not your day. Not every day is going to be Christmas. So you need to be able to have a complete team to lean on other parts when maybe that isn't working and maybe other parts of the other team across the way is really working to be able to get out of there with a victory and keep your goals certainly intact. You need to be able to win in different ways. That's my second point. That kind of goes into what I just said, certainly over there. And you need to have elite players. I should maybe say great to elite players in key positions on the football field as well that can will their team to a win when maybe the rest of the team isn't playing their best on a particular day. So I want to set up a point for when I talk about two teams before I get into the four that I believe can come out of this thing and come through the woods and off of the trail and be in good position when we're playing football in the first week of December. And both of these teams lost on Saturday. Okay, the USC Trojans and the Michigan Wolverines. I think at some point or another, right, I and other people out there thought that both of these teams, the Cardinal and Gold and the Maize and Blue, whether it was preseason or whether it was early in the season, that they could maybe be a fringe college football playoff team. Heck, maybe they could be in the race for the Big Ten championship. But I think as we stand right now, I feel pretty confident that both of those might be empty boxes without checks when all is said and done. Let's start first with the USC Trojans. Like when we talk about that complete team, we talk about that chain. We talk about the chain, the links in the chain that are strong, that keep everything together. Okay, you can't have any breaks in the chain. I'm going to be talking about the breaks with USC and Michigan. Sometimes those links in the chain might wear down, but there's other links that are strong to keep them together. When I take a look at the weak link in the chain for USC right now, it's that offensive line, man. It's that pass protection. Like, if Elijah Page can't develop and Mason Murphy can't improve, you saw what can happen with this USC team. When this offense gets out of sync and you have the first half like you did against Michigan, you had the first half like you did against Wisconsin, you had the first half and the rest of the game like you did against Minnesota, it's not going to end well, folks, for this USC team. They get out of rhythm. Now, when their offensive line is playing better, then the throw game gets involved. Then the run game gets involved. Like, the defense is improved for USC, but it's not improved enough where they can lean on that defense. Like, look at a team like Nebraska, where they can lean on that defense where they don't get a lot of their offense, and they can still find ways to win that way. I don't think USC is built like that. What's the best part of USC football? What's the best part of a Lincoln Riley team? A coach that produces Heisman Trophy quarterbacks. It's the throw game. And if they can't protect Miller Moss and the throw game gets out of rhythm, the whole team gets out of rhythm. Now, what you look at what USC has, like, they already got 2 losses, 2 Big Ten losses. Like, you can kiss the Big Ten championship picture goodbye. College football playoff, you got to run the table. Now, you got Penn State this week. That is a vaunted pass rush. We're going to be talking about more about that here as this one goes along. But if that offensive line for USC plays like they've been playing, and the same for Penn State up front, Penn State could eat, and they could eat a lot. Nebraska is a really good defensive line who USC plays at the Coliseum a little bit later in the season. Notre Dame is a good defensive unit as well. Like, I predicted USC to go 8-4 at the beginning of the season. Right now, I think that prediction I'm feeling pretty good about it at this moment in time. We'll see if the Trojans can improve that weak link in the chain. Now, let's talk about Michigan. Their weak link in the chain is half of their offense. It's the passing attack, right? When you're changing quarterbacks this much, it's really hard for any quarterback to gain confidence. But I also understand that Sharon Moore needs to do what he needs to do to be able to get the most out of this offense. Now, I believe Jack Tuttle is their best option at quarterback with a change of pace type of dose with Alex Orji. But I think you saw it this past weekend against Washington. Steve Belichick, I thought, did a really good job. Okay, when you load the box and you force them to throw the football and they can't do it, okay, all of a sudden it becomes easy to defensive game plan against a team like Michigan. Okay, and then you look at their defense. Okay, I think the front of their defense is, of course, really, really good, but their passing defense has been susceptible so far this season. So I think the parts that we thought were going to be elite in college football for Michigan haven't been at that level. Okay, I think outside of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, this is a good defense. I just don't know if it's that elite defense that we were expecting possibly at the beginning of the year. Same with the run game, right? We talk about a team that can weather the storm and complete that survival challenge of the fittest, a complete team, elite level players. The running game, I think we thought Donovan Edwards, Mr. Cover athlete, could have a really good year. Now, Khalil Mullins has come in and he's been really good. They got to play Oregon, they got to play Ohio State, and they got to go on the road to Indiana, and they got to go on the road to Illinois. If I'm picking those games with those I schools, I think I'm picking the Hoosiers, and I think I'm picking the Illini. Because Michigan has got to go on the road in those specific games. They're going to be taking those teams' best shot. You can guarantee that here for the rest of the season. Okay, let's get into which teams that I believe are built for survival. Now, I think the top 3 is fairly easy to predict, but I've got a maybe on the Indiana Hoosiers. Let's go through each and every single one of these teams and why I think that they are built for survival this year in the Big Ten. Of course, I'm going to describe these 3 teams at the top with a different word to describe their offense. For Ohio State, it's efficient. This is an offense that's just always going forward. Maybe it's not as explosive as it used to be, but it can be. They have a veteran presence at quarterback, and when you talk about Ohio State being an efficient offense, I think it really starts and ends with Will Howard, right? He completed his first 10 or 11 passes against Iowa this past week. Now he's got to do a little bit of a better job protecting the football. You turn the football over against a team like Oregon this weekend, and that's a team that can take advantage of it. Iowa couldn't take advantage of it. They might have the best run game in college football with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They have a coordinator where everything seems to fit what he wants to do, and Chip Kelly. They might have the best receiver in college football with Jeremiah Smith. Emeka Buka certainly isn't too bad as well. And then you look at that elite level defense. There's obviously no argument why Ohio State can survive this challenge that the Big Ten throws at them. But look at that first half against Iowa. Look at maybe bits and pieces of that game against Michigan State. I think there's some teams on the remainder of the Buckeye schedule that maybe could challenge them a little bit. It's just when you're facing Ohio State, you need to be able to score and you need to be able to take advantage. Michigan State wasn't able to do that. Iowa wasn't able to do that. The Penn State Nittany Lions might be my favorite team. I love the way this Nittany Lions team is really built. I grew up, of course, in the heartland of America. I grew up in the Midwest, and I just love this no-nonsense, great defense, run the football, maybe not the sexiest type of football that Penn State is playing right now. Now, I grew up, speaking of my lineage and where I grew up and what I like, I grew up playing defensive end when I play football. All right, and I love a good pass rush. Like Reggie White was my guy growing up. Some of my first football memories is when the Packers won the Super Bowl in '96 and went to the Super Bowl in 1997-98, losing to the Denver Broncos. And Reggie White was a big part of their success. Penn State has a fantastic pass rush. They might have one of the best pass rushes in the entire country right now. Of course, Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton are just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, Zane Durant and other characters up front really make this a vaunted defense up front. I think their front seven overall is just really good. Like their linebacking core, Tony Rojas is really good. Kobe King is really good. Dominic DeLuca is very good as well. You know, I know losing KJ Winston in the back end of that secondary is going to be a big loss, but I think Zakee Wheatley is a pretty solid replacement back there as well. And I think that secondary continues to improve and improve and improve for the Nittany Lions as well. Now, we talk about them maybe not being the sexiest team in the world. Look, they're not, and once we get into the heart of Big Ten play, which we are now, they're not going to be going out there and they're not going to be putting up 35 to 40 points a game. They're not going to be putting up, 300, 350 yards a game every game, right? They might do it some weeks. But this is just, I describe them as methodical. I described them as such after that Illinois win when I did that in my reaction. This is a team that wants to invest in the run game. This is a team that, maybe isn't as explosive down the field. I think Amari Evans is the guy that can get over the top compared to maybe what some of these other receivers in this team are. They invest in the tight end, of course, with Tyler Warren, getting him the football and some of those short to medium concepts as well. All Drew Allard does is protect the ball. He's very confident. He's very comfortable in this Andy Kotelnicki offense. And I just like the way Andy calls things. I love what they did against UCLA, sending an offensive lineman in motion, getting a running head start, and letting him tee off on an outside linebacker or a defensive back. I just love the different things that Andy is doing. I think that this is the best Penn State team probably since like those 2016, 2017 years. 2016, they won the Big Ten championship. 2017, they had that instant classic falling to Ohio State, and they didn't make the Big Ten championship that particular year. But I just love the way this Penn State is built, certainly right now. When you talk about Oregon, that's the team that's explosive, right? Efficient, methodical, explosive. This is an Oregon team that, ho-hum, Will Stein is just putting together another top offense. Okay, Dylan Gabriel is a big part of that. Now, when we talked about these teams being complete, okay, and being able to weather the storm throughout the Big Ten, you got to do it in a variety of ways. Certainly they can throw the ball over the top. Certainly they can get it to a variety of weapons, a tight end and wide receiver. But I love what they did early on in that game against Michigan State on Friday night, where maybe the throw game wasn't as successful, so they pounded the rock with Jordan James. They did it last year, right, with Bo Nix and then with Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving certainly got down and ran the football in Eugene, Oregon. So I love the way that they can be elite doing whatever on offense. I love how they can throw it 40, 45 times a game and light you up for 400 through the air. I love how they can get down, play Big Ten football, and grind it out with one of the best offensive lines in the conference and one of the best offensive lines in the country. And then when you look at Oregon on the defensive side of the ball, I think that this we talked about in the offseason. Can Oregon have a championship-level defense? I think they're getting to that point. Jordan Birch is stepping into that role as one of the best defenders, defensive ends, defensive linemen in the Big Ten right now. He's playing great football. And then when you combine him with somebody like Derek Harmon and Caldwell up front of that line, that's a really good front right now for Oregon. I think those injuries to Jeffrey Bassa and Justin Jacobs early in the season actually created much better depth at linebacker. Bruce Betcher, Devin Jackson, Tatum Tuioti have really stepped up and been really, really good. So I think that is becoming a big-time position of strength for this Oregon defense. And then, boy, good luck throwing on these defensive backs. The secondary has taken a big-time step up for the Oregon Ducks. This is, and we're going to have a cinematic game between Ohio State and Oregon this week. More on that later in the week. But, yeah, this is certainly an Oregon team that can weather the storm. They can do anything at any moment in time. Let's talk about Indiana, right? When I talk about Penn State as being my favorite team, Indiana might be number 2. I love what Indiana's doing. Now, here's the thing. Okay, I put them not on the same level as these teams for a reason. I think Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are much more talented right now than Indiana is. Now, when we look at the Hoosiers offensively, okay, what do we talk about being a complete team? We talk about balance, being able to do it in a variety of ways. This is an offense coming into last week that was leading the Big Ten in rushing. Okay, this is a team that can run the football. They can go at you. This is also a team that we know in Curtis Rourke, an experienced quarterback, experience and years being able to see different defenses is huge. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, Will Howard at Ohio State. These are experienced guys. Curtis Rourke is an experienced guy, and he's playing with much better talent than he has played throughout his entire college career. Now, here's the thing about this past week. Northwestern scored 24 points on them. I thought Northwestern was an offense that just would have a tough time scoring in general, so maybe it makes you question Indiana's defense a little bit, but I think Indiana, considering their schedule, okay, they got a lot of games at home, at the Rock, that's going to be able to help them. They play Nebraska at home, they play Washington at home, and they play Michigan at home. Now, that Ohio State game, of course, is going to be extremely difficult, but when you combine their schedule with maybe they'll just outscore teams, and their offense can do it. If they're not running, they're passing. If they're not passing, they're running. Their offense can just figure it out and find a way to put up a lot of production. I think when you combine that, Indiana can be a team. I think Indiana has replaced the Michigans of the world and the USCs of the world as that fourth potential Big Ten playoff team at that moment in time. Now, what makes it a survival of the fittest for these teams? It's the teams that they're going up against. It's the teams that don't make life easy in the Big Ten. Now, I've got 6 teams right now. Now, there's a few other teams that, could present some challenges maybe to some teams. I know Wisconsin put up 52 on the worst team in the Big Ten in Purdue. That could be a mirage. If the Badgers get it going and they beat Rutgers, they beat Northwestern. Like, that's what the dairy rate is supposed to look like, what we saw this past Saturday. If Wisconsin can keep that going, all of a sudden they're 5-2 and they're playing Penn State, and then we'll see what happens when they have some confidence. So, but right now, it's Purdue. Prove it against Rutgers. Maybe I'll jump on your bandwagon. We'll see. Maryland is a team that can do some things offensively, but I just don't think that those teams are complete enough to be able to give a lot of the better teams trouble remaining on their schedule. So not all of these teams are going to be playing big-time teams. So let's just take that with a little bit of a grain of salt here going forward. That's what you get with mega conferences. That's what you get with the disparity in scheduling. Let's start first with the Washington Huskies. I think the parts of this team that can really give teams trouble is that their offense is just very good. Like, they've got a really good quarterback in Will Rogers right now. We know about Jonah Coleman, what he can do. The combination of Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson. I think this offense, if they can, like, in a particular game, they play on the road at Penn State in a whiteout. Good luck with that. They go on the road to play Oregon, of course, in the last game of the season. If they play a great game at quarterback and at their skill positions and all those guys, just have a really good performance, maybe that can challenge things on the Ducks defense. Maybe that can challenge things a little bit on the Penn State defense. But the key for them is going to be offensive line, especially against those two teams that are really good up front on the defensive line as well. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on for the Washington Huskies. And I think their defense has improved as well. If they continue to play like they did against Michigan, meaning a cleaner style of football, a more disciplined style of football where they're not beating themselves and they're committing less penalties, this is a Washington team that I think can hang in a lot of games this season. This is also a Washington team that in a couple of weeks goes on the road to Bloomington to face off against the Indiana Hoosiers. They also have USC in Seattle a little bit later on this season as well. Here's the thing about Nebraska. I am not sold on their offense. I think they've got some big-time questions to answer on their offense. I think their offense is playing much better when they are running the football. But their defense is going to keep them in every single game they play this season. Look at how Iowa played against Ohio State. Okay, I think that this is a Nebraska team that is at the very least on par with what Iowa has on defense. I think the Black Shirts are playing very, very good football right now, and I think they're gaining confidence by winning some of these close games, finding ways to win when maybe their offense isn't playing their best right now. This is a Nebraska team that I think they could give USC a run for their money later in the season because of the matchup, USC's O-line against this Nebraska defensive front. We know James Williams, Jamari Butler, and Nash Hutmaker, and Ty Robinson. Just saying, look at how Minnesota won that game. I think Nebraska could win in a similar fashion. It's going to be a little bit more difficult going on the road. We know the Huskers have to play Ohio State as well this season. Iowa and Rutgers, I think, are built very similarly, right? These are teams that have really good running backs to elite level running backs. Kyle Monangai for Rutgers, Caleb Johnson for Iowa. We've seen at different points in this season so far, earlier this season, where these running backs just take the ball and take over. When you look at the anatomy of an upset, right, it's these guys taking over and really leaning into that run game. Now, when we look at schedules, like Rutgers' whole personality, it seems like this season, is they don't play some of the big boys on the schedule. Now, you look at the rest of Iowa's schedule now that they're past Ohio State, I think that they could give some of those big teams trouble without even playing them, because if Iowa just takes care of business and Caleb Johnson gets back to being an elite level running back, this team could run the table the rest of the way potentially and be sitting there with just one loss in the Big Ten, and maybe some tiebreakers go their way, and maybe it's the Hawkeyes that are playing in the Big Ten championship instead of maybe a team like a Penn State, maybe instead of a team like an Oregon, certainly as well. So maybe giving those other teams trouble just in a different way without playing them. They're coming off of a bye week, so maybe people are a little less hot on them right now than maybe they were a couple of weeks ago, but the Illinois Fighting Illini, they just don't beat themselves, right? That's, I think, what's going to make them very tough for the Michigans on the schedule and the Oregons on the schedule the rest of the way, is you've got to play a really good game. You've got to play a really complete game to beat a Brett Bielema coach team, and they're very balanced on offense. Luke Altmaier is a good quarterback. They've got a good run game, and they've got good receivers. Like, look at that game against Penn State. Like, when we talk about giving teams trouble and pushing teams, I know Penn State looked strong, and their defense was great, obviously, for a majority of that football game, and they wreaked havoc up front. But this was a one-score game going, mid to late fourth quarter? So Illinois has already proven that they can make life tough for one of those teams on the road in a quasi-whiteout environment, right? Illinois has already proved it. And if they played Michigan right now, I'm picking the orange and blue. I'm picking the Illini in that game. That's how much I believe in the Illinois Fighting Illini, certainly, right now. Let's talk about Minnesota, okay? That when it looks like that they are at least trending in the direction of figuring out the run game with Darius Taylor. And then Max Brosmer just continues to get better and better and better every week. And you've got big-time players showing up in big-time spots for the Minnesota Golden Gophers right now. And that defense is playing better, especially the secondary. Coy Parrish is a future superstar. Death, taxes, Minnesota safeties. Antoine Winfield Jr., Tyler Nubin, Coy Parrish is the next, certainly in that line of players in the secondary. Having Justin Wally back, I think, is a big-time boost as well for this Minnesota defense. Watch out late in the season. Penn State has to go to Minnesota late in November, the week before rivalry weekend. Penn State travels to Dinkytown. The last time they did that, they were also ranked in the top 5, and they fell to Minnesota in that magical 2019 season for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I think that this is a team with games like UCLA and Maryland coming up next, coming off this win against USC. I think that this is a Minnesota team that we need to watch out for. I think this is a Gopher team that's going to be able to continue to build momentum, certainly, throughout this season down the stretch. I know this was a long one, but I believe that it was an interesting one and one that I really like covering and really diving in to this particular subject. I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree with who I have as maybe those teams that could survive this war of attrition? What about Indiana? Where do you think that they fit in all of this? Is USC still have a shot? Like, they beat Penn State this weekend, and they put some things together all of a sudden. I think they're back in that discussion, at least for the college football playoff. Leave all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Folks, it's going to be a big week. Stick right here to the channel for Penn State USC and Oregon Ohio State previews. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.